When I was in elementary school, whenever I got bored playing with Legos and Barbies, I would walk over to my dad and ask him a question. What did you do when you were my age? I expected him to talk about games, toys, or cartoons, but instead, he told me about a completely different world. He said that when he was young, he and his friends used to play in the river near their village. They built fish traps, raced each other, and even sold what they caught for pocket money. The entire neighborhood was their playground, and entertainment wasn't something he looked for, it was embedded in his life. At the time, I thought my dad was simply telling me a story about people, and I didn't realize how he was also telling me a story about a place. Later, I asked my grandmother the same question. Her answer was surprisingly similar. She also grew up in a village near a river, and she would often help her mom wash clothes by the water. What sounded like a chore to me was, for her, also a place where neighbors met, where women exchanged stories, where children played nearby, and where daily routines gradually become a part of the community's rhythm. Neither my father nor my grandmother thought these memories are special. To them, it was just childhood. But to me, it felt almost impossible to imagine, because my childhood looked completely different. Most of my memories happened indoors, inside my house, inside classrooms, inside shopping malls, and inside commercial spaces designed for entertainment. If I wanted somewhere fun to go, I would just search for it. But I began to realize something. None of these places were a part of my daily life. They were destinations I had to search for. And that made me wonder, what happened to the communities my father described? So I decided to find out. I grabbed my camera and started exploring the older streets of Guangzhou and Foshan, right behind the shiny new skyscrapers. And what I found surprised me. In those older areas, people still chat in courtyards. Yet, back in my own neighborhood, I barely knew my neighbors. The more I explored, the more I realized that it wasn't just people who had changed, the spaces around us changed too. And by comparing my observations with what I started to learn in architecture, I found three likely explanations for these changes in our cities. First, the expansion of scale. As cities modernized, everything just became bigger. Look at these two photos. The streets kind of feel different, right? Well, according to the book Aesthetic Townscape, when a street's width greatly exceeds the height of its buildings, the important sense of architectural enclosure is destroyed. Today, by widening the streets to handle more traffic, urban planners had created a larger, car-centric scale that just feels distant and impersonal. In addition, elevated highways in many Chinese cities today create big, empty spaces underneath, further separating people. Things just become bigger and wider. Even metro stations are built oversized despite modest passenger flow. Take Fangcun Station in Guangzhou, for example. The big station is just rarely filled with people. It seemed as if planners had overpredicted population growth in that area, leaving behind a station that just feels empty and oversized. Second, the disappearance of meaningful shared spaces. In today's society, privacy has become the priority. And in response, many shared spaces are often discouraged by real estate developers. Although residential projects still often include public gardens and plazas like this, these spaces often remain quite empty, especially among younger residents. In other words, they often feel designed to be viewed rather than used. They are quite beautiful to look at, right? But they rarely become places where relationships develop naturally. And at the same time, older, well-used community areas are frequently demolished in exchange for commercial projects. Take Liede Village in Guangzhou, for example. What was once a vibrant community with active social spaces is now just a collection of apartment buildings with fewer communal areas that people actually use. Third, the copy-paste city. Look at these photos. Could you guess where they're taken in? Well, let's just reveal the answers. They are Guangzhou, Singapore, and New York City. I mean, they kind of look the same, right? Well, today, driven by efficiency, globalization, and the pursuit of a modern image, we've entered an era of what we call 1,000 cities, one face. Even residential neighborhoods are often built using the same templates. Take Evergrande Real Estate Group's real estate projects, Oasis, for example. You might think these photos are of the same apartment buildings, but they are, in fact, situated in multiple cities. Even historic towns and tourist areas now look the same, filled with identical shops chasing internet trends and economic rewards rather than preserving local character. I mean, as globalization accelerates, things are becoming more connected, but also increasingly similar. So the question becomes, can we do anything about these problems? I believe we can. As a high school student, I don't have all the answers, but I believe the future isn't only about building something new, it is also about building upon what we already have. And I think there are 3 directions worth exploring. First, we can rethink scale by narrowing the streets and activating leftover spaces. For instance, we can reuse the empty spaces beneath elevated highways like this. These negative spaces could be transformed into lively community zones, such as markets, gardens, or even just shaded walkways. By activating the space underneath the bridge and slightly narrowing the road, the street suddenly becomes more human-scaled and approachable. Look at this AI-generated after image. By activating the space underneath the bridge and slightly narrowing the road, it just becomes more inviting, right? In other words, we don't always need to tear things down. We just need to be smarter with what we already have. Second, we could restore community public spaces by letting people decide what they really want. Right now, many shared spaces in new neighborhoods look nice but feel quite empty. What if residents themselves could decide what to do with these spaces? Imagine a community coming together to transform this underused plaza into a shared garden like this. By giving people a real say in shaping their own environments, we may be able to rebuild social connections that have been quietly disappearing. Third, we can rebuild urban identity by bringing back the local flavor. Even though globalization makes many aspects of life similar, each city still faces its unique social context and different climates, right? Why not make these differences more visible and significant? For hot and humid cities like Guangzhou and Foshan, we could design streets with much more shading, ventilation, and rain protection instead of just copying wide sidewalks. At the same time, we should actively support localized businesses and cultural heritage. Instead of identical chain stores and viral tourist shops like this, we can encourage individual shops and traditional crafts that reflects the souls of each neighborhood. Looking back, my journey started with simple curiosity about my father's stories. Through walking the streets, studying maps, and reflecting deeply, I realized that our cities are not just physical environments. They actively shape how we live, how we connect, and how we identify ourselves. And the best part, we can shape them back. If we become more conscious of how urban space affects us, If we design with people rather than just for efficiency and profit, we can create cities that are not only human, but also modern, distinctive, and full of life. I hope this journey doesn't end with my speech. Today, after you leave this theater, please don't just take the widest, fastest road home. Take a detour. Walk down an old alleyway you've never seen. Look at the empty spaces underneath the bridge. Talk to an owner of a small, independent shop. Don't just be a passenger in your city, be an explorer. Because the moment we start paying attention to the spaces around us is the moment we start taking our communities back. Thank you.